You know, the last time I made a Dangers of Woo episode, we covered a bit of a piss-poor topic. Okay, fine. The bad jokes aren't my thing. I'll just get somebody who's better at that whole shtick. But who would I open this video up to? Who could possibly help?
Did someone say bad jokes? Aha! A cry for help. BionicDance to the rescue.
Oh, I normally use portals and hop on other people's channels. Did you use a spaceship to get here, or?
Almost. When I detected a friend in need, I leapt from my orbital station and made planetfall using my jetpack. So you might say that I went down.
I think I'll let the audience decide what the implications of what you just said are. They can hash that out in the comment section. With that said, I was right about to tackle faith healing and intercessory prayer. Do you think you can help?
Why, yes. Yes, I can.
So, what is faith healing? Well, basically it's the idea that, given that a god is all-powerful, the god can logically cure anything. It can take many different forms, but today we'll be focusing on the Christian flavor of faith healing in its most common forms. So let's break down how prayer works first, since that is usually the first avenue of asking for help in order to receive the needed healing abilities of this deity. God's answers to prayer are usually yes, no, or yes but later. So let me posit a few examples. For prayer, we'll say the subject is Susie. Susie has cancer. A prayer for her cure is uttered. We expect one of three scenarios. God says yes, and the cancer goes away. God says no, and the cancer stays. God says later, and the cancer will remain until it leaves. Now, each of these is up to interpretation. Susie could suffer on Earth and then feel better in heaven, so an answer of no or later would be deemed as the exact same answer in this situation. However, the difference between standard faith healing and, say, prayer is a little bit more insidious. You see, with prayer, you usually have the three answers, but with faith healing, you're given two scenarios. You're either cured or you're not, and unlike with prayer, these scenarios do not hinge on the will of a god. They instead hinge on the human beings involved. If the healer and person needing to be healed do not have enough faith that the healing will work, it is claimed that it will not work. So if the healer has enough faith, and trust me, they will claim they do, if Susie isn't cured, it will definitely mean that she didn't have enough faith. It's Susie's fault that she wasn't cured. Obviously, there's a psychological component to this problem, and I find that pretty aberrant in itself, since with Susie, she would essentially be blamed for not getting better, which can actually make the problem much worse, since there is reason to believe that ability to heal is linked to stress levels. Now, there is something to say for the placebo effect, and while it's not entirely understood, it is no less an extremely powerful component to consider when treating any illness or testing any medication, and there can be a small benefit to having somebody think they're healed, or will be healed, in order to trigger a possible placebo effect. But I think BionicDance might be able to explain why that component doesn't necessarily have more pros than cons when it comes to intercessory prayer, and then we'll move on to faith healing after that.
Rather than make assumptions or rely on faith, studies have been conducted to see whether faith healing has shown any benefits, no difference, or worse outcomes when compared to modern medicine. Cardiologist Herbert Benson conducted a study in 2006 of the effects of intercessory prayer for cardiac patients. 1,800 of them, poor bastards. There were three groups. 605 received prayer for 14 days after being told they might or might not get prayer. 597 did not receive prayer after being told they might or might not get any. And 601 received prayer after being told that, yes, they'd be getting some of that spiritual mojo. The results? In the two groups who didn't know for certain whether or not they'd be getting prayer, complications set in between 51 and 52% of the patients. Awfully darn close, that. However, in the group that knew for certain they'd be getting prayer, complications set in for 59% of the patients. While that may not seem like a huge difference, it is, according to those conducting and reviewing the study, medically significant. Other studies which produced results of negative patient outcome were statistically similar. There are very few cases where prayer has been found to have any medically measurable benefit, and most of those either included a very small sample size or were conducted in ways that make the placebo effect a very likely possibility. As as admitted by those doing and reviewing the studies. Successful in vitro pregnancy, for example, was one of the studies conducted which found a positive result, not exactly a bad heart or a brain tumor. And one of the positive result studies, one of the in vitro experiments, created a scandal that led Columbia University to have its name removed from the study when it was discovered that one of its authors had only learned of the study 6 months to a year after it had been completed, and after a professor at another university found that the experimental procedures were flawed. There are, however, many other studies which have found no significant change in results whether prayer was applied or not. Bottom line, if you want to get better, prayer isn't exactly your best bet.
I believe the Templeton Foundation actually ran a lot of those studies, which is hilarious since they were desperately trying to prove that intercessory prayer works, and as you pointed out, it works roughly at the rate of chance. So we've got intercessory prayer out of the way. Well, what about faith healing? Well, that nonsense has its own issues. If somebody tries faith healing instead of actual medicine, the rate of recovery will be roughly equal to that of somebody who did, well, absolutely nothing. So this would be the same scenario if the person couldn't afford medical help, right? Well, no, not really. See, here's the thing. When you seek out faith healing instead of some actual kind of medical help, you're not doing nothing. You're actively walking away from real help. Even people who can afford treatment for their children's illnesses can and will choose bogus faith healing methods instead of real medicine which garners real results. And this leads to unnecessary suffering and even death. But I'm sure there's some actual data on how many children are harmed as a result of this practice, and if so, BionicDance, what did you find?
What I found is a lot of unfortunately dead kids who could have been helped by actual doctors. You don't have to do a lot of Google foo to find story after story of people whose children died because their parents decided to trust magical healing powers instead of taking their little booger eater to the doc. In 1998, Rita Swan, founder of Child, teamed up with pediatrician Seth M. Asser, what an unfortunate last name, I bet prayer didn't make his childhood any better, to review the deaths of 172 children who'd had medical care withheld on religious grounds. The results? They found that 140 of those kids had a 90% chance of survival if they'd gotten some genuine medical care. 35 states in the US have some form or another of legal shield for parents who decide to withhold their child's care on religious grounds. 16 of those, thankfully, have an exemption that allows a court to order treatment, but that's still a lot of places where a kid can get killed if their parents are faith heads. Seems strange if you think about it, and remember that a lot of religious people consider themselves to be pro-life. But something to keep in mind, if you're thinking your kid doesn't need that penicillin or insulin shot, there's a good chance that could land you in the slammer. It's not difficult to find more than a few examples of so-called parents getting put in the pokey after letting their toddler die for their God. So if your kid's life isn't enough of a motivation already, remember that not taking them to the pediatrician might land you in double jeopardy. That kind of cudgel shouldn't be necessary. You'd think you'd love your kids enough to get them fixed properly. But, well, there it is. Bottom line, stop killing your kids. It's, rude.
Thanks, BionicDance. And if you haven't subscribed to her channel, you definitely should. She's one of the content creators that's been in our space the longest. If you're watching this on her channel, then, hi. With that said, everyone, I hope we've convinced you that intercessory prayer and most certainly faith healing are not feasible alternatives to real medicine. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Dangers of Woo, and with that said, everyone, if you enjoyed the video, I hope you like and subscribe for more. Let us know what you think about faith healing in the comment section below, and if you like either of our brands of content, why not support us on Patreon? Links to both of our Patreons will be in the description, as well as a link to BionicDance's channel if you're watching this on mine. The usual links will be down below, and before we get into the Patreon slides, everyone, as always, insert end of video tagline here.